Okay.
Okay, reminder, everyone, it's a public meeting, so we are recording. In terms of who else is attending, I know Dante and Shannon are both on vacation. I believe Kathy will join us. We can kind of get started with some of the process stuff in advance of her joining. And I think Steve Weir was a maybe, so hopefully he'll join as well. So I will do a quick roll call. I know I see you all, but if you could just voice whether you're here or not. I know Dante and Shannon are not. Christine.
Here.
Nicole.
Here.
Erin.
Here.
Zulma.
Here.
And Steve, you're not on, are you? Okay. So next we are going to approve the meeting minutes from the last two meetings. I'm really sorry that we got them so late to you. We had some technical difficulties that made it a little challenging, but we're in a better place going forward. So can we start with the 7/28 meeting? If we could have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved. Motion to, yep, so moved. Second.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain? Okay, approved meeting minutes for 7/28. Then last week's meeting, August 4th. Can I get a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Okay, Erin and Christine, did you second that?
Sure.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain? Okay, motion passed. So is that all we need to do, Jen, for our process?
As far as I understand, yes. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we just spend a couple of minutes walking through the agenda, and then we'll just get right into the work. Let me share my screen. Okay, so are you all seeing anything here? Are you seeing a presentation?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, let me see if I can.
And Alicia, Kathy joined, so welcome, Kathy, as well. We're just getting started.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, great. So you're all seeing the today's meeting cover page, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So in terms of what we're going to cover today, Kathy, we already went through the roll call, which we'll add you to when we approve the last two meeting minutes. If you have any comments you want to make about those, you can just email them to us.
Okay.
Hopefully you're okay with them. We're going to give a quick employer engagement update. We got some new information that's really interesting. And then we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about the presentation we'll be making on the 27th and specifically about the recommendations. And then we'll spend a few minutes talking about next steps, depending on how much time we have left. So I'm just going to dig right into the employer input. This first slide is something we talked briefly about last week in terms of our focus groups and one-on-one discussions or small group discussions. We've engaged 53 employers from around the state. A lot of the themes that we've heard, we've discussed before, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time because there's nothing really noteworthy. We do have a number of meetings coming up, including one at the end of the month and then more in September and October where we'll start to socialize some of our recommendations. The new information hot off the press is, I think I mentioned last week that we did a survey to businesses through the Chambers of Commerce. And we actually got incredible response to that. We had over 100 responses, I think 110 responses to that survey. Let me pull up the data.
Did you just have something that looked like where they came from, or did I miss that?
Here it is.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. So across all different industries with manufacturing and healthcare are two of our key sectors getting the most response, covering 55 towns and cities. And we got a lot a range of employer sizes. One of the things we haven't done yet, because we just pulled this data today, was start to look at this by size of employer and see how their responses to some of the questions we asked might differ. So right now it's compiled all together, but we can kind of disaggregate some of the data and see if there's some significant differences by employer size or anything else that you guys might be interested. So you give some thought as we're presenting, or later on if you think we should, cut the data a different way. We have an analyst here helping us who can do that. Interestingly, over half of the employers said they are already engaged in some type of work-based learning. We'll talk about what they're doing in a minute. And they were all interested in a lot of them were interested in talking more. So we have a list of people to follow up with, which we'll plan to do in our future outreach, inviting them to some of those roundtables and sessions that we're having going forward. And we may find we want to have some one-on-ones with some specific employers. We have names and contact information. We can do that. So in terms of what they do, the most common type of work-based learning activity are career fairs and workplace tours. That's usually low-hanging fruit for employers. Interestingly, second was internships for college students. And then it kind of goes on from there. I'm not going to talk about every metric here. I'm just going to give you an overview, but I will send this information so everyone can look at it in more detail. And what's really interesting, I think, is why they participate. And really, they participate for business reasons. They want to build their talent pipeline and develop industry-specific skills. They're not doing this typically for charity, although some of them identify that that's something they care about, but that's not their primary motivator. And, we should be thinking about that as we're building solutions.
Can I ask a quick question? Do you have a way to break that data down by activity, by employer type? Like, was it the manufacturers that wanted the college interns? Like, who wanted what?
Yes,
I think be really important to understand.
Yes, I think we can slice and dice the data. We have it, by kind of employer, every answer. So we can do whatever kind of polls we want. So we'll keep a running list of what we want to dig into a little bit further. Thanks, Kathy. So some of the key points here in terms of like the friction points, really understanding what opportunities are out there, and then some of the challenges we've talked about, like paperwork and legal issues. So the friction is really like informational and administrative. They also, 63% of them mention they get duplicative asks. And we've heard this over and over again from employers. They're being asked by multiple schools because there's not so much of it, always a coordinated effort. So when we asked employers what would help them engage more, financial incentives was the biggest one, probably not surprising. And then the second was a single point of contact. So these are things that I think we're going to talk about as we kind of dig into our recommendations, but confirmation from a wider group of employers. A lot of the themes are what we've heard in those focus groups, but this is just a more quantitative analysis with a wider group of employers. In terms of those who are not participating, 79% of them said they would consider it. No commitment, but they would consider it if it was easier for them. So we're going to kind of think about what we can do to make it easier. A lot of them may, and this I think will be important to look at employer size and see how many of these are like really small or medium-sized employers, because one of the things they said is, the greatest reason is they don't have the capacity, they don't have the staff to do so. Some are saying they were never even been asked. So, again, factors that we should consider in our recommendations. One of the things that employers mentioned, more than 50% felt like schools and colleges don't understand what their talent needs are. And Nicole, I know this is something you have mentioned before. So not that we doubted you, but huge confirmation of what you've been saying. And there's a real opportunity, not only for our work-based learning group, but the commission as a whole to think about that employer engagement. And then we did ask about whether they could pay interns, and Some of them just said yes off the bat. Others said funding would really support that. Again, this will be another one we'll want to look at by employer size and see how that breaks down. I know I'm whipping through this really fast. If anyone has any questions, I don't even know if I could answer them because like I just saw this data, in the last few hours, but we can definitely dig into anything else, as I said.
And if you could send it out right after this so we could take a deeper dive instead of
Yep.
waiting till next week.
Yes, we will, for sure, Kathy. And one thing I think that's very interesting, not only for our committee, but for the Career Connected Learning Committee who's going to present on Thursday is 83% of employers flagged workforce readiness as an issue. And that's something that we are building into kind of the student supports and, kind of curriculum like durable skills training. But this really hits that point home that that's needed for employers. So this just kind of summarizes some of those key points that we've already talked about, like an employer hub where employers can go, not having so many points of contact, funding and incentives are important, workforce readiness we just talked about, career awareness, like employers, like some of the quotes we got were things like, I want them to know more about my industry or my business. A few employers, and we can look at more specifically how many, mentioned some very specific things like apprenticeship ratios, and that was a challenge for them, as well as like working restrictions for students under 18. We haven't really talked about that yet, but that's something we can dig into. And the final one was matching interested students to real job openings. So takeaways for the group. Demand exists on both sides, and like we just have to figure out how to match it. Again, single point of contact for businesses. Funding is important. System doesn't really understand employers' needs all the time, and readiness for students. So high level, but what do you guys think? Don't need to answer now in terms of what more you'd want to know, and we will send this out. But any reactions generally?
Not surprised about the workforce readiness. They've been saying it for years. And again, holding off comment until I see which industries are looking for what. I think that's going to be very key to how you move this forward.
I'm not surprised by any of it. I think it's consistent with what we've been talking about, and it's been consistent even some of my work in the previous district in terms of like employer focus groups and things like that. So it's very consistent.
Okay. Nicole, any feelings about this as an employer?
Yeah, no, I think the data is excellent. Couple things. One is looking at those that would want some kind of upfront, grant or incentive pay, for sure that full, if the guardrails around the programs aren't too difficult from either paperwork or, equity scales of pay. The second thing is paying for interns. It's very interesting. We don't ever look at unpaid internships here because we look at them as, the student is providing us value. It's an even exchange, and that's our feeder program to our future workforce. So all of our internships are paid, but it would be interesting to look at the size of some of these businesses if they're that much smaller, and they really don't have those budgets. What does that look like? Because I would hate something like that to hamper the program, where certain size businesses can pay, other businesses can't, and then we get kind of confused on how to set it up. So just a thought.
Yeah.
Also, just to add to what Nicole's saying, like, I know in Bethel, like when I was there, we didn't have paid internships, but we awarded credit for internships. So I think that's something to think about too, because that's another motivating factor for students at times.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and I wasn't at Zulma's presentation, but I think in the higher ed space, there's kind of a combination of those things. Zulma, any thoughts on that?
We do have a stipend program that gives students a stipend for those unpaid internships. It's very competitive, and we have more applicants than funding to support. But we try to, when we establish relationships and partnerships with employers, we try to make it clear that will be better for them and the students if are paid internships. But some companies, as Nicole mentioned, are too small to really be able to afford those paid internships. But the stipend program is what we use.
And in some of the research we did with some of the stakeholders, some of the things we heard were it's more common. It's not as common in manufacturing. It's more common in like the public sector or nonprofits that the internships may be unpaid.
The other thing we do is for those, we try to work through the academic departments to award academic credit in some instances. So that's another alternative.
Yeah, especially in higher ed, that could be of real value, you know, a real financial impact to students.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get all this out to you. We'll plan on doing that right away so you can start looking at the data and we can, you know, make requests about what else you'd like to see, how you'd like us to, you know, look at in more detail by kind of sector or whatever else, employer size. Okay.
Alicia, before we move off of the employer group, I just want to recognize Chelsea is here. So,
yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Because we're still on the employer group. So Chelsea, I think, trying to think who knows whom, but Chelsea has been our point of contact. Dante connected us with Chelsea and De Cruz Industries. For some reason, I always want to say De La Cruz. I have no idea. So I apologize in advance, Chelsea. But Chelsea, like, we did a one-on-one interview with her. She's been on, I think she was on this call. Oh yeah, you spoke on this call. Like, we've had multiple engagements with Chelsea, and she's been like so interested in our work. When we said, hey, you're welcome to come to our any committee meetings, she's like, yeah, I'll come today and I'll come to, you know, the next one. So she's a welcome guest. We appreciate it. And just, you know, if you have friends and family who represent the employer voice that you want to tell about our committee meetings, please have them come. They can listen in. They can share their insight via the chat, via Alicia and my emails, text us, call us, because again, we're happy to get all of the employer insight that we can. And thank you, Chelsea, for continuing to be engaged with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for letting me sit in and listen. It's an interesting topic.
Of course.
Appreciate it.
Sure.
Yeah, and committee members, as we're kind of going through and talking through some of these things, we always have Nicole as a great employer voice, but while Chelsea's with us, feel free to, Chelsea, I hope this is okay to offer your, you know, your insights as well.
Thank you. Yeah, of course, definitely. Happy to help.
Okay, Jen, you want to take this slide just since this is your great creation?
Yeah, my like work back plan, or like where we are in this whole process. So we've been looking at this every week, this little chart, and just want to set like where we've been and where we are. So over the past several weeks, we've had these great presentations that will that have helped us all, I would say, learn more about the work-based learning topic, that can then just have us sort of be more educated on the topic to be able to inform our recommendations. So, and then as part of that process over the last several weeks, we've also started with our big ideas, right? So we have the top 5 things that just off the tops of our heads, we're like, these are the things that we want to deliver to the commission. So we're at the point now where we will still be sponges to learn more. So Connecticut State is actually kindly doing a presentation similar to the one that Silma did for Central, that Dante and Kathy and Shannon did for the organizations that they represent. And they're actually going to just record it for us, provide it to us, and we can listen to it at our leisure. There might be a state or national speaker that we have an idea that, national speaker, national organization that does work-based learning that we can learn from. We want to get insight from them. It's likely going to be after the commission meeting. And then there's also some other considerations around maybe other state agencies. So we're going to continue to learn. But if you see our arrow as of today, the 8th of or the 11th of August, we're really at the point where we're like, we were at the top of the funnel, you know, our big ideas, and now we're starting to narrow to get to more refined recommendations. So last week we were up here. Now we're starting to go here, and over the next couple of weeks, we're going to get to the set of recommendations that we're going to deliver to the commission on August 27th. Just to be clear, and you probably have a sense of the rhythm now that we've had at several commission meetings, what we present on August 27th is not final. It is our first set of recommendations. We're meant to socialize it with the rest of the commission, have dialogue. From there, we'll take their input. Then we come back to the full commission. We have a part of the agenda on the next meeting where in between the 27th and that meeting, we'll take their input, revise our approach, have a, again, shorter time for discussion on that agenda. And then from there, we're going to start to draft our section of the report, our work-based learning section. So you can see there's going to, you know, our work is going to continue to iterate and get more refined over the coming weeks and months. But just wanted to be sure we're all tracking, you know, with busy day jobs and so many things, taking your attention on where we are.
Great. Jen, you want to continue this
Sure.
one and yeah,
absolutely. So, okay, so we're now turning to the point in the agenda where we are starting to think about, again, our more refined recommendations. This is actually just an outline of our overall commission meeting presentation. It's like the full presentation. So it includes things like, hey, commission, remember the vision for work-based learning that we introduced at the discovery meeting on June 25th? Probably not. So we're showing you sort of the whole outline for the presentation, but what we really want to go deep on are the things that we highlighted in yellow. So I'm just going to run you through the whole outline. Again, we're going to bring this to you in more detail next week, and then we're going to go deep on the things that we highlighted in yellow. So in the meeting, we're going to share the vision. We're going to remind our commission colleagues what the continuum looks like. Again, folks probably haven't looked at that since June 25th. But we're twisting it a little bit and looking at it from the student journey lens, just to bring it to life. Then, not surprising, and we will spend a little bit more time on this one, is that before we sort of define our technical solution, we have to be sure that we're all singing from the same songbook, that we all, as committee members and commission members, know what we're talking about, like what are the outcomes at each stage of the work-based learning continuum, and what does quality look like? What are the standards? So I'm actually going to walk you through I'm really not going to walk you through in detail. I'm going to introduce you to a first draft of that. Spend a little time just to get your initial reactions, but again, we'll send it to you so that you can look at it, break it apart. It's a first draft. Then another of our big ideas is this idea of a hub and support model. So for the broader commission, we intend to remind them of the business context and the employer input, similar to what Alicia did today with the survey results, but it will be all encompassing of all the employer engagement efforts. We'll spend a little bit of time today to focus on picking up from the conversation last week where we kind of brainstormed all of the functions that needed to happen for work-based learning to effectively operate in the state. So the supporting work-based learning implementation are all of those functions. And that should inform intermediary structure design. So Alicia's going to take us a little bit through the initial thoughts on that. We also know we have sort of big structural issues. So transportation and scheduling, school scheduling issues impact the ability to do effective work-based learning. So we're going to do a little bit of brainstorming there. And then there's also enabling levers that we need to consider, again, as part of our recommendations. So those include funding, data, and policy. Today, we are just going to go a little bit deep on the funding recommendations. And again, next week, our idea is that we come back to you with a more complete sort of draft of the presentation that includes all of these elements, takes into account what you've shared on these areas highlighted in yellow today, and then adding in sort of the full other elements so that you have a full sense of what the presentation will look like. I hope that that makes sense from a sort of a process perspective. Yeah, I see nods. Okay.
And we're going to build in as much time and opportunities for your feedback as possible. So, and some of that will be inter-meeting, some of it may be offline, you know, collecting email responses, but we're going to do everything possible to make sure when we're presenting on the 27th, everyone is fully like versed on what our recommendations are and feels comfortable.
Yeah, your fingerprint should be all over this. Alicia, my job is just to facilitate it. So I think we probably have four topics. So probably we'll try to just introduce them and get your initial reactions. Alicia, probably makes sense, like 10 minutes sort of each topic.
Yeah.
Something like that. And that's not to say that we don't want more insight or input. It's just like, this is our starting point, initial reactions, and then we'll take your feedback and iterate. Okay, so I will walk us through the kind of having a common understanding of what each phase in the work-based learning continuum means. So that's this first slide. And then the second slide is about, okay, what are our standards? Like, what does quality look like? And so I'll just, again, there's a lot of words on this page. I'll lightly walk you through it. And we're really just looking for initial reactions, okay? So for this one, obviously, career awareness, exploration, and experience are the 3 stages in the work-based learning continuum that this committee introduced back in late June. I'll give you an example. I'll just walk you through maybe one pillar. So for career awareness, you might recall that the activities within that are things like career fairs and panels, industry guest speakers, mini job shadowing, not super long, but just like light tours or site visits. For each of those pillars, we've taken a first pass at identifying what does the student get out of it? Like, assuming they go through that activity, and this goes a little bit to Zulma's comment several meetings ago that really has resonated with me with, like, what are the learning objectives? Like, what are the outcomes? The students are going to go through these activities. What are they going to get out of it? And so you can see, for example, under career awareness, the outcomes, again, as a draft, they have an expanded awareness of pathways and really understand, to Nicole's point, within a certain radius, if they're in high school, for example, of their school, what are the high growth industries? Like, what's available to them? And through that process, they really start to crystallize a little bit their personal interests and what's important to them when they think about work. So again, no pride of authorship here. These are all ideas for reaction. Then, of course, we have to think about our other significant customer group, which are employers. So what do employers get out of the career awareness pillar of work-based learning? And you can see some examples there. So literally, that's the process by which we're saying we want to be sure that we are all clear, in addition to the activities that happen within each pillar, what do the students get out of it? And what do the employers get out of that? So that's sort of the first step for agreement. We're going to massage this, improve it, align on it. I'm going to pause. And then the next step would be to talk about, well, what does good look like for each of these pillars? So let me quiet down for a moment. And again, just initial reactions is what we're looking for.
It's Nicole, if I could,
Yes.
maybe if I can start on the left, just the activities.
Yeah.
I think, I'll just speak to where we've found success versus where it's been a little bit harder. I think the career fairs are really good if we have some fun swag and we have really upbeat people that are out on the road. that doesn't always happen because it depends on the cycle we're in. So we find it much better to get the students here to our building. So I am going to tend to go towards those tours and site visits, and then even like a half-day mini job shadow, which we will do. It's not paid, but we'll go ahead and commit to that. So that's our preferred method right now. The guest speaker thing, I'm not as familiar with because we haven't gone to myself. I think I have one engineer here that was from Sikorsky who goes to speak at Sacred Heart. But I have not done the guest speaking as much. So just to give you what's working for us right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that this will also, in some ways, once we get to the sort of like transportation issue, there's like do you bring the business person to the masses in the school or vice versa? So like there's a trade-off obviously of both. So the design of whatever we come up with has to incorporate a consideration of transportation and impact as you just described, I would say. That makes sense, Nicole. Thank you.
I see Kathy's hand up.
Yeah, so to that point, Jen, that's on the continuum. You would bring the speaker to the district to create the awareness. You take the kids to the site for the exploration. So it follows that function. We do it with the sector strategy partnership. We have what's called the Speakers Bureau, and the employers sign up. And then as the opportunities to go to the career fairs or the different events that the schools are holding based on the industry sector, the employers sign up to go, or they get somebody from their shop to go, so that there's like this master list of people that want to go to the school. And then the next step for the next evolution of that is to bring the student to the work site. So I think that's part of the continuum as to what happens when.
Yeah, and it's probably there's probably some flexibility, right? I think what we're saying is we have to sort of have both solutions available to one like to Nicole's point, where they're getting the engagement when the students come on site. And there's also value in bringing individual business leaders to schools or to districts so that they can learn. So I guess what I'm hearing is that they both have value, and as part of our recommendation, we have to figure out how we can best organize so that both can be available and that serve in a way that serves the districts, as you just described, Kathy, and then the employers, as Nicole described. Because in the end, and I think the other aspect here is and we'll get to this probably when we get to the next slide, which is the standards, is the current lack of consistency across the employer experience and the district experience, right? Like that's sort of what we're solving for, which is increasing that consistency and access and availability both for employers and for districts. Does that make sense?
But I think you can't solve the experience on paper. The experience gets solved over time. So let's not try to solve for something that's going to have to evolve. You can't just put it on paper and think it's going to get better automatically.
So say more about that. What's the assumption behind that statement?
So your point is that different employers have different experiences. And so, yes, and they will continue to as this evolves. As speakers bureaus get formed and employers are going into a school, what's the feedback and how does that evolve, right? So we're at a starting point to address the different experiences will evolve over time. Same thing with kids taking a field trip. We know what we want them to experience, but how does that develop? And you'll only learn by doing and make pivots as it progresses.
Yeah, 100%. That's a whole, thanks for explaining that, Kathy. Yeah, that's a design principle of this whole thing is we're going to design or in our recommendations have a design that we assume to be, the starting point, but part of the implementation plan would be that feedback loop to say, okay, what's working as we expected, as we, beautifully wrote on a piece of paper or in our report, but what's actually happening and what do we need to iterate or change because it didn't turn out like we thought it would. So if you're saying that this is not like put it on a piece of paper, think the design is beautiful and everything's going to work. That's not the intent. It's to have an iterative process. Yep, I 100% agree, Kathy.
Erin has been very patient.
Now, a lot of what others have said, I mean, I see the benefits in both ways. And I think you have to look at where you're starting. I know we've talked about, dipping down into middle school. And to me, remembering my time in the classroom, having people come in, maybe if they're middle school students, like 8th graders, would be something that would be of interest and that kind of fair, which a lot of them have. But I really think the site visits are more beneficial for a high school student. I think they get a better idea of what the job is like when they actually get to go to visit. And certainly if they get to shadow, that even makes it even more different. We saw a lot of that when they used to have, and I don't think they even have them anymore. Remember, bring your daughter to work day and bring your son to work day. There was a lot of that we heard. I remember hearing from kids when they came back, maybe not so interested in what mom or dad did, but very interested in what other people in their workplace did.
Yeah.
And for a lot of them, it was the first time they were ever exposed to that and any kind of exposure. So I think there's benefits in both ways. And I think the biggest benefit also when they visit a site visit is the personnel that goes with the student. Mm-hmm. They also get a better appreciation of what that business is like versus like how Kathy said on paper, you could read what the company does and what they're for, but there's nothing better than actually visiting a site.
Yeah, absolutely.
Erin, you make a good point about starting earlier. And next week, when we show you the student journey, it does include some of the career awareness activities in middle school. So we say middle school, early high school for some of those experiences. And we actually even mention elementary school is a good place for some really, age appropriate introduction to, the world of work.
And a lot of elementary schools still have career day, where they come in. That's a very common practice in elementary schools. Still to today.
Yeah.
They still
and that is part of the continuum we don't want to ignore. Jen, I'm going to move to the next slide. Is that good?
Perfect. So again, we'll send this to you so you can break apart the words and if it doesn't make sense. But again, the idea is that we as a committee and ultimately the commission have a clear understanding of what we expect our students and our employers to get at each stage of the continuum. Again, as a starting point to Kathy's very good point. So then we have to get to, well, what does good look like? Because if our idea is we want students to have consistency in what they get, right? Again, to the extent possible, and it will evolve as we learn. This again is a very first pass to clarify what good looks like when students go through the career awareness pillar and then through exploration and through experiences. And this then sets the ground for how we in the future assess how well we're doing. Again, I'll just be quiet for a little, let you read this. No pride of authorship. This is content for reaction so that we can get a common sense of what the standards might be. And so I might put you on the spot because your commentary about outcomes and learning objectives really resonated with me. So I'm curious if this is aligned with what you were thinking.
I am very pleased to see this work and really aligns with what we are doing at Central very well. So
Thank you for being our inspiration there.
And I think that we are up to something good, very good.
Yeah, Nicole here. I agree. I really, the first career awareness and then the third column career experiences for me are really hitting home.
Yep.
I'm a little struggling with that middle one.
Fair.
Because I feel like it might get a little squishy and
Mhm.
ambiguous. Could be hard for businesses to say, well, really, what's their role?
Mhm.
How much time?
Yeah.
You know, is there payment, is not payment? So I think my definition or advice would be to spend more time in that
Yeah.
middle career exploration.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I'm just gonna offer, for lack of understanding, the compensation piece of it in terms of stipends, wages, credits. I think we have to define what that is more and what the expectation is for the
Yeah.
budget impact and to the impact, to the state budget impact, and then to the employer.
Yeah. So we will definitely, as part of like the enabling lever for our committee, Kathy, spend more time on funding and things. I think what this is trying to say, if I could like peel back, I don't know, the onion I always say, but peel that back a level, is just to say that once we design and implement a consistent approach to work-based learning across the continuum in the state, that there is a consistent standard, and we're ensuring that we are meeting labor laws, that we are addressing safety standards, that the wage structures, or in the place of wages, credit possibilities, there's like an equity to it, and that's part of like assessing what we're doing. This is sort of the foundation to be able to assess, again, making sure that there's equity considered both in compensation and compliance, that like one group of students in a particular district don't experience a lack of safety standards. Like we want everyone to have like a consistent experience with the right safety standards. Does that help at all?
I'm not sure. We'll see.
Okay, that's fair. Hold me accountable as we have a few more discussions.
It's not
on it,
even
if it doesn't
holding you
become clear.
accountable. It's just understanding what the outcome is intended to be.
Yeah. And it's so the short answer is that it's a consistent standard that the students experience at the end. That's the short answer.
I think I'll just add, with keeping in mind that like different employers do have different pay scales and may pay differently for different jobs, and to make sure it's like it's fair, I think conceptually, but I agree with you, Kathy. We're going to have to dig in and define this more if we're putting together a funding request, a budget. Right now, it's more concept, I would say, and then there's the devil's in the details, and there's a lot of work to do there.
Okay.
All right, I think from a timing perspective, we said we give about 10 minutes plus for each topic. So thank you for the insight, because this is, again, first draft that we will iterate based on your feedback.
Okay.
Alicia?
Yep. So as a reminder, this was the output of our brainstorming session last week. Just a lot of ideas about like what kind of supports we need to develop, expand upon to really offer like good quality and scale work-based learning. So what we did is we took these, as well as what we've heard from employers and some research that we've done, and we've talked to a lot of other stakeholders as well, you know, the State Department of Ed and the CTEX and you know, other Department of Labor, other people throughout the system. And we tried to develop a framework for what type of supporting functions would be needed to implement work-based learning at scale. So we've grouped them into these 5 categories around employer engagement, operational delivery, quality and improvement, policy and systems change, and data research and learning. These functions, some of them are really minimal right now and what's happening in the state. Others are happening in pockets. Some are happening more wide scale. There's really a variety. And we want to figure out how to provide better supports so we can do all of this at scale and really have a good system. So again, we're going to send this out and love your input on this, but just a reaction on how you all feel about organizing the functions this way, and any specific inputs you might have.
Question?
Yeah.
Hi. So from Nicole, is there a way to list on each of these almost like a cheat sheet? Like which ones of these are up and running already and they're robust and active and well attended, or versus what essentially are new concepts? In that we'd have to kind of grow into.
Yeah,
'cause
we
Okay.
started to take a stab at that, and actually, maybe what we can do is share our best guess. Some of this, part of the problem, Nicole, is, and one of the big components of this is there's not a lot of data. Like there's pockets of data around specific programs, but like there's no work-based learning data set in the state. So that's part of the challenge and part of the need. Like if we're going to be asking for funding and having some expectations around work-based learning, we have to measure it. So that's something I would say is happening very minimally now that we need to grow. But, Kathy, I think you could provide a lot of insight on this. So maybe we can work together with you to like try and, I'm not going to say grade these, but like identify where it's we really need to invest more kind of time and effort versus some things that are happening, more widespread.
Yeah, I mean, you've
And
got
not
a
on the
lot
spot,
on
but we
this
can
slide.
do like a, yeah.
You got a lot on this
Yep.
Yeah,
slide.
there's a
I mean,
lot.
this
Yeah.
is, I literally just
Yeah.
finished scanning it and I would need to go back and take a way deeper read and thought.
Yep.
And I do think, yeah, to some point, some of this is up and running, some of it can be better or expanded. And some of it, to Nicole's point, doesn't exist yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that's another way to score this is within these buckets, what's happening, what's not happening, just to rate and rank each category that you have there.
Yeah. And Kathy, I wasn't suggesting doing on the spot. I was thinking
No,
we could work
I'm
with you
just saying.
offline and like
Yeah.
try and take our stab at like what that would look like. I took my own stab, which I didn't want to share because I was like, I don't really, I have some ideas based on what I've heard, but that's limited to, the research that we've done to date. So why don't we put that as a to do? But Nicole, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, thank you. Because some of the terms, like I don't know how to define continuous improvement cycles. I know how to define them in my business. I don't know how that metric works here. Is that
Pretty
we'll track?
similar.
Yeah. Well, is it there? We're going to track the number of students that apply, and then those that don't get jobs, and then we're going to try to get better at that, or are we going to track the number that get jobs but then don't stay there because they just, like I would want to know more about what are the top 3 continuous improvement cycles we would want to kick off first.
Yeah.
It's broad, which is great. I mean, there's a lot on here, as Kathy said. So.
And I think we'll have to also think about what's the work of this committee in terms of defining the specifics around that and what is going to be solved in some of the implementation work that will follow the work of the commission. Like, what do we want to do to get to where we need to go in terms of making recommendations to the governor around like what this looks like, what kind of funding we need versus like the nitty gritty details of how that might work. And that's kind of, for all of these, we have to figure out how deep do we want to dig? And maybe we have also definitions, like what do these things all mean? Because just a phrase may not be so clear to everybody about what regional workforce alignment is. So maybe we can have like in an addendum to the report, like how we define some of these phrases.
And I guess the only like additional lens I would put on to that comment, Alicia, Nicole, is this group is really focusing on implementing work-based learning at scale. So when we think about the continuous improvement cycles and the examples that you gave, those, Nicole, sounded more like outcomes for the entire commission work. For us, I think it's like once we have the standards defined for the various pieces of the continuum or various pillars of the continuum for work-based learning, what is our recommended approach to making sure that we do have continuous improvement cycles running? And to Kathy's point earlier, like we design something, right? We kick it off. Well, how do we know if it's working like we expected or not? So that's just another lens, I think, as we go through our recommendations, is our focus is a little bit more narrow, and then we're going to combine our work-based learning recommendations with the broader commission focus. That's helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. When we think about like these various functions that would support really good work-based learning at scale, like how might we go about achieving that? And so this is just an idea for the group's input. We've talked a lot in the commission and in our committee about intermediaries. So I just put in like a very generic definition of what an intermediary is: an organization that sits between education and employers and just provides support, coordinates the relationships, programs, and supports needed to move learners into their careers and support businesses to meet the talent needs. So what we are recommending, just based on what exists in the system right now and what doesn't, is like kind of a multi-tiered intermediary structure that may provide some statewide resource for those functions that make sense to do statewide, and then a regional delivery structure for organizations that are close to the schools and employers that really make things happen. So here are just some ideas about, based on the functions we looked at the last slide, who might do what. This is very much a draft, but like helping grow the employer base, because we know that employers are saying they want, more of a one-stop shop. So maybe that's the statewide resource. The data research.
I gotta stop you there, because the whole use of the one-stop makes me crazy, because the AJCs have been a one-stop since the 1990s for employers. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping that, because it just, again, it's
would
a
it just be
lingo
better?
thing.
Yeah, it would be better if I just don't use one stop. Would like an employer hub, would that be better, Kathy?
I'm just sharing with you, like, it, for those of us that do this, like, if it's being presented like it's a new thing. And I think that's part of my concern.
And I think as a committee, I think we have to recognize what we've heard from employers, which is their needs aren't being met by whatever system we have in place right now, which I think we know is a variety of business services teams. We've talked a little bit about, there's like business services teams, a lot of places. And I'm not saying the workforce boards aren't doing a great job with the work they do.
The one-stop system is not just the workforce boards. That's the whole thing. So I think the term intermediary is maybe the term we stick with instead of like a one-stop, because the intermediary would be the facilitator, right?
Okay.
So that's all I'm saying. It's just, and from last week's presentation, it was like kind of frustrating.
Some kind of centralized place where employers know to go. And that's kind of to be defined what that means.
Yep.
Things like data, research, learning, policy and systems changes, like technical support, and maybe proactive marketing we've talked about it, to employers as well as to students and families. So that could potentially be done at a statewide level. And then a regional delivery structure that really, kind of executes the operational aspects that were on the previous side: employer site quality, student experience monitoring, again, these are just like ideas we threw on here, but some kind of structure that provides some state report, some state responsibility, and then some regional delivery.
From the perspective of paperwork, compliance paperwork, worksite agreements, things like that, where do you see that falling? Would that be statewide or regional?
Kathy, can I ask you?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like
But I want to see, because you guys have been thinking, you've been doing the research. So right now, like, worksite agreements are pretty regional. But I do think there needs to be one common structure for all school districts and all employers. So it can be delivered regionally, but it needs to be developed for a statewide with a one common document. We're not going to have
that's
that be a regional
exactly what we
nuance.
need from you.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
That makes
and
sense.
that's kind of was the concept, like things that can be done statewide. Why are we reinventing the wheel
Right.
5 or more times for those types of resources? Like the idea of that statewide resource would be to make the jobs easier for the regional delivery partners. So anything that would be common or could be, you know, help scale, that would be the statewide resource. And then, you know, where
Develop
the,
statewide, delivered regionally. So I think that's kind of like the level, right?
yeah,
Okay. And then also the only other third rail I'm going to touch here is a data system.
yeah,
Because without it, a common data system, this is going to get crazy.
yeah. So we have that as under the statewide
Okay.
resource. One of the things that we're going to talk about, we're not going to talk about it today, but we are going to scope out what kind of data that we would want to track. I don't think we're going to make recommendations on what system we'd want to use, but like really, where do we want to get to? Like what kind of information do we want happening, and like what kind of common system might we contemplate? Again, not vendors, but like what
Right.
are
But I think for you to answer your first question, you have to go look at systems to see what are they gathering. So you can't do it in a vacuum. You got to go look at what is the different data systems that are tracking work-based learning. What are they capturing? What of that do we want, or do we want more? So I think you have to look at some examples, industry current examples, to know what you want, to see what are they tracking and how successful is that being. You know, Zuma, do you use anything? Does anybody use anything? I mean, anybody that was doing it.
So I know, Kathy, I'll just mention, you know, I know some of the businesses kind of cringe when we hear portal again, because we're like, uh-oh, you know,
Yeah,
portal, you get into it, is it maintained? Do we know, you know? So like if we could use a different word to have, to your point, a database that allows us to have access to students, you know, by, you know, what year are they in school, what's their likes, you know, do they like healthcare, do they like, they want to be a teacher, they want to be, and then it lets us kind of have access to them, whether it's high school or college. I think that would be amazing. Yeah,
So I
because we could
think
go
you
in and
just-
like, well, I keep saying, sorry, I keep
okay.
saying to heat map us around our businesses. So like if I could go in and say, okay, within a 40-mile radius of microboard, show me students that, you know, like robotics, they want to work in mechanical engineering, they want to, somebody else could do it for nursing, but you're within a 30 to 40-mile radius. And if we don't call it a portal, I think we'll be fine. Like we call it
Yeah, I
something
think
else.
you're right about that, Nicole. And
Yeah.
honestly, you made me think about it from a different perspective, because you're looking for a portal of candidates, and I'm talking about a tracking portal for the candidates, right? For the kids. So I think we have to strike a balance between putting kids in to be reviewed for selection and then tracking them once they're at an employer. And I think, like, as an example, Handshake would be the place to go look for kids, and Build Within would be the tracking system. So I don't know if there's one that does both. I think that's an option we need to look at.
So I
We
think
don't want more than one.
yeah.
Right.
And so I think, and I'm gonna like play like be very vulnerable real time and check with Alicia that my understanding is similar to hers as a starting point, right, Kathy? Because this is a really important conversation. So my understanding of what the commission is delivering in our report is what is taking away from this conversation is like, who are the users of this system? What do they want to get out of it? Like, what are the design principles? Like laying that all out, and then that gets fed into the whoever is picking this up, right, and doing the implementation plan to go out and say, okay, now we've got sort of the design requirements for the system, and oh, by the way, this committee is only one committee. The other committees are also providing input. Our commission report has the starting point, the requirements, the design principles that then goes into some kind of more RFP process, for implementation.
Structure.
Alicia, is that like aligned with what you're thinking?
Yeah, I think it is. I think to
Okay.
Kathy's point earlier, what will be helpful is if we look at some systems that are out there, just to
Yeah.
like look at what's possible or what are other people doing that maybe we haven't considered. I think that will be good food for thought for us. But I
Right.
agree in terms of the design, we want to say, here's what we need. And
Yeah.
then like Kathy, there are probably, if we're going to do this statewide, there will be some RFP process and,
Right, of
a
course.
committee and
Yeah.
whatever. So
Yeah.
I think yes to both of you.
Yeah.
is
So
what I
learn
would
more.
say.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you for the discussion, everyone.
And to Aaron's comment in the chat, Aaron, is that Naviance, or is that something different, or there's one common database across every school district for CSDE?
There's one common database at the state level, and then Naviance is probably the most popular one. Christine probably could help there too, but probably the most popular one in districts. But the state actually has a tracking system for each district and each student. And I know in some instances, like for example, our ag programs, they actually track them through their programs and beyond, like which ones go into that after they leave high school. So there's even tracking beyond when they leave the high school.
And does that also cover the non-public schools or just the public schools?
Good question. I'm not sure if the charter schools are you talking about the charter schools or are you talking about private schools?
I think just in general, outside of what you and I would coin as a public school.
Yeah, I mean, it's called EdSite, and anyone can access it.
Okay.
EdSite, and anyone can access it. I mean, we try to get parents to access it all the time because it gives a lot of information about their particular district, and then a dive right into their school.
That's great. Thank you.
Yep. And I'm going to check with Ajit. He's our guru. I'm going to give him a call and see what exactly the type of tracking. It might be someone that we would need to talk to as we look at data systems.
So Erin, we've had a lot of conversations, and Jen, add in whatever you have. We've had a lot of conversations with Ajit about this and about in general, because this covers more than just work-based learning. What he did share with us is right now, other than that ag program is a great example of, there was some specific funding to track work-based learning in some of those programs. But outside of that, work-based learning is not tracked in that system. Not to say it's not possible, it just is not being done right now.
Yeah, I know a lot of the dual credits is, and of course a lot of that is very similar. Those dual credit folks are also work-based, but right now they're tracked as dual credits. Yeah,
but the work-based learning activities that we've been talking about, not tracked.
Yeah,
and they need to be.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
So I think in terms of this intermediary support, if everyone agrees that this general framework is good, I think we have some work to do in like identifying how this might work, who might be, not like specific individual organizations, but what types of organizations would be connected to either potentially a statewide resource and then the regional delivery. I mean, we have some ideas, but, and I think that's what to do for Jen and me and Kathy. I think, like we'll bring the co-liaisons into some of that discussion to kind of scope out some options to present to this committee to consider. And then I think our idea will be at the next commission meeting, potentially present the commission with a couple of options for them to consider and provide feedback on. Sound good? Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left. Is any other commentary on the intermediary structure? If not, we can get into a couple of the other, I think there'll be quicker topics to discuss. Okay. So the next topics were the kind of structural issues, transportation and scheduling. We've kind of struggled with like what kind of recommendations we should be making because they're such big, challenging issues. So we have some more work to do here, but thought we might have a couple minutes of brainstorming. Any ideas you might have, throw out there about how we could potentially solve for either of these, the transportation and the scheduling issues, which have been identified by both schools and employers as issues.
And Alicia, could I just add, I think the scheduling is primarily a high school issue as opposed to a higher ed. Transportation cuts across high school, college, adult learners. Would that be fair to say?
Although Zulma and Nicole, I know, Nicole, you've hired college interns. I don't know if you ever do any during the school year or if it's exclusively summer. And Zulma, have you heard anything about scheduling issues at the post-secondary level?
Fair question.
We have kept interns on during the school year, and they've mostly worked remote actually for us, which has worked out really well. And what we're trying to do is keep them interested to then join us full time. Yeah. Many times when they're going into their senior year of college, we will give them an offer letter at the end of the summer if we've had a really good internship with them. Then that allows them, if they want to work during the school year, we always tell them their schoolwork's priority, obviously, but X amount of hours a week they can. They're managed, obviously, to make sure the workload's correct. And then we give them an offer letter that invites them back in May after they graduate. That's worked very well. So not so much with high school students. I think we might leave one high school student on this year to help us with tariffs. So, because it's a good one. So, but most high school seniors, rising seniors, or rising college seniors, sorry. So.
I guess I would ask Erin, like, what's the current most common scheduling? Is it the block scheduling that everybody's kind of at now, or do we still have those that are doing, some do the A day, B day, and it just rotates, and others are 5 different days?
There's still a mixture out there.
A pretty heavy mix.
I would guess, and it would be a guess on my part, that I would lean toward block more so, because we seem to hear that a lot when schools come in front of us they're preparing to go to block. But that being said, I don't know how many that were at block and now are going back to their rotating A, B, and C days. So I think it fluctuates. And I'll tell you, scheduling is ever changing.
Right. And it's always like, having been on a board of education, they don't like to be told what to do. So what's that look like, right?
And a lot of it, a lot of it has to do, I think a lot has to do with graduation requirements. That's when you'll see some real innovative districts really start looking at that. And then that's when they look at the schedule and realize it's their own schedule that is causing the difficulty with not meeting the graduation requirements, but allowing a student to have beyond what those requirements entail.
Okay. So I think, guys, that's something we have to consider.
Kathy, do you mean that looking at the graduation requirements and potentially making some policy recommendations around the burden that may put on opportunities for students to participate more in career connected learning?
No, you took it way too deep. I think it just means it's going to impact the scheduling.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's still, and I know this has come up often, there are flexibilities in the graduation requirements. It's just a lot of districts don't choose to use those flexibilities, but they do
Right.
exist.
Yeah.
It really just takes a like almost an audit of where their course, their class offerings are. But they do exist. But a lot of them will say it's because they're sort of pigeonholed into the graduation requirements, whereas others can do it pretty successfully by being very innovative in how they do them without, and still meeting the requirement.
So am I playing back, Aaron? What I think I heard was like, if schools, and Kathy, you tell me if I'm going too deep, because I probably am. If schools knew about the flexibility that they had in the graduation requirements, that would free them up to move to a block schedule that is the best sort of structure to support work-based learning, particularly on the experiences end of the continuum.
Right,
Is that
where the
like
kids
way
could
too
get
far?
released, right? Where the block allowed for a release.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I do agree with that.
okay. Good.
I would think that if they were to look at that a little bit more, and we've had districts, I wish I could think of some right off my top of my head, but
Yeah.
that have done that and, check to make sure with, the department that they're doing everything correctly. And they usually are. I mean, it's not so overreaching. And I think a lot of times is that they realize it from their own colleagues sometimes, I think.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get that? And, how did you get that requirement under math, say? And they explain to them how they did it. And it's it's not that difficult. It really just takes a different kind of mindset of where to do that.
So it's almost the interpretation of the rule versus the rule itself.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good way to say it. Yep.
Super helpful.
Yep.
So Jen, maybe one of our to-dos can be to talk to like our contacts through CAPS and figure out where there's some innovation and understand what they do and what challenges they face. If there are any like policy recommendations we want to make, or is it really just in the execution? And then maybe, identify some best practices, or some of it may be like a marketing thing, ensuring schools are aware of how they might navigate these issues.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome insight.
And then, Nicole, you mentioned, and this kind of goes to transportation, that some of your work may be hybrid for, students, or, remote. And one of the things that Jen and I have been talking about, we heard it in Shannon's presentation, that there are opportunities for various types of internships that may really include engagement, like strong engagement with an employer, but may not be at the employer site all the time, or more limited, that addresses some of these transportation challenges that some students may have, especially the high school students. So how does everyone feel about that type of concept in terms of like quality work-based learning?
I can speak from microboard. We much prefer on-site. Obviously, they're getting mentored and learning a lot more. But once they've spent a summer here, if we're keeping them on fairly basic tasks that are still really important to the business, then we're okay with that, work from home. Obviously, we want to move their skills up. So it really just depends on the role. Like a purchasing person, they can help us do some stuff from home. The more we invest in BI, business intelligence, and the more we have fingertip data, the more we can feed them. So it depends on the strength, I think, of the business's software suites and data outputs to how well, so it's limited here, and it's position specific, basically.
And what I missed the first time you explained it, Nicole, is that they are on site first. That's a requirement before the opportunity for remote is open to them. So that's actually another, again, possible innovation that others in your seat might not be thinking about to make it work. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. And again, that doesn't solve, but chips away at some of the transportation challenges.
Yeah, and potentially maybe some of the scale challenges that we might look at, like how do we address some of those? How do we get, especially for the high school students, like how do we get a lot more of them access to like employer experiences?
Yeah, I'm going to ask a kooky question, maybe. Someone I worked with years and years ago worked in the state of Pennsylvania, and she had some kind of like agricultural mobile unit. And I thought it was so interesting because it took the work to the students as opposed to taking the students to the work. And that's an example, agricultural. Have anyone seen anything like that in Connecticut where there is an opportunity to build those maybe experiential skills or anywhere along the continuum, I guess, where it's bringing the equipment to this where the students are, as opposed to bringing the students the equipment to where the students are? Like anything about that, like mobile stuff?
No.
I don't know about mobile, Jen, but I do know, for example, Lyman Hall, they have an ag program inside Lyman Hall. Well, it's a separate building, but they do have, oh God, what is it? Aquascience. They have a huge area that is exactly where students actually go to work in there. They don't leave high school. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So yeah, and I probably like sent you in the wrong direction by saying agriculture. It was more the model of bringing the equipment to students, like particularly who live in maybe more rural areas of the state where it's harder to get onto an employer site and learn, right? And do the hands-on learning.
Okay. Yeah.
So the agriculture was like in a particular industry, but it was more the idea of bringing the equipment to a wide group of students versus having a wide group of students, or in addition to a wide group of students who can access employer sites. Chelsea, you had a hands up.
Yeah, so it's so funny you mentioned that because, and I'm trying to find on my LinkedIn, Melanie Hoban, I don't know if you guys are familiar with her. Yeah, so I know that she had a mobile unit that she was offering years ago, and it was a unit that would come and offer training services to our employees.
Yeah, it's through Goodwin University.
That's
They
what I
have
thought.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it kind of like is in line with what you were just saying,
Yeah.
just like a way of bringing that training to the source.
Yeah.
And it's, manufacturing related. So I know I've seen that. That's like what you're talking about.
Yeah. But it sounds like it's not something that's like prevalent at all in the state. There's bits and pieces. Okay.
Right. But it could be a model that could be, replicated in another way. But yeah. So anyways, I have seen it.
Cool.
Probably the closest thing to that is in the CTEX. They do some really good work around, like they have offerings like an automotive shop at their schools that people can come in and bring their cars and get fixed, and the students are getting like hands-on experience. They're not at an employer's per se, but it's acting almost like an employment.
Yeah, that's another model. That's
them.
like the third model. You've got the equipment in the school, or you've got equipment that moves around to different schools, or you share the equipment. Yeah. So, but these are all, again, maybe as we segment the types of schools that we have in the state and consider different solutions to the transportation challenges.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Interesting.
So we just have a couple minutes left. Why don't we take a quick look at the funding slide? So in this case, this is very overview ideas for, we're calling funding an enabling lever. Like we know we need funding around certain areas. So we broke it down into like system funding, student funding, and employer support. System funding would be things like funding an intermediary and teacher professional development. Student funding would be more obvious, something like expansion of the program Kathy presented last week, the Connecticut Youth Employment Program, maybe some stipends like Zolma mentioned for students in specific industries or sizes of business. And then we've heard from employers that incentives would really help them in terms of expanding opportunities for work-based learning. One of the things that we could propose is like an employer tax credit, like a payroll tax credit. And then there is some funding around apprenticeships in manufacturing, but it is pretty limited to manufacturing. So do we want to propose anything outside the manufacturing industry? So some ideas, not exclusively the only ones, just some that came to mind right away. Love to hear reactions or other ideas you might have in terms of funding.
So I can tell you that as we're about to stand up the first registered apprenticeship in culinary, there's no financial support for that. There is for manufacturing, and I think to your point, at least it's the only one that gets supported. So, and I recall that it took a Herculean effort to get it there. And then at that point, it was only for C Corps. So could be the third rail, but very important as a possibility, right? Funding the student opportunity where some kids would really like this opportunity but need to go to work to support the family is also something we need to consider. So there's a lot of social implications in this. And then really for the businesses, how do you give them the return on investment, which that's another key. And I would love to hear Nicole's thoughts on that.
Yep. Yeah, if I can comment, again, right now we don't rely on the funding, but if we could get a stipend that allows us to partner to help pay for the students' transportation or gas through us funding and the state funding, it would be a huge plus for us because the whole burden's ours right now. I go back to the apprentice program, which we struggled with because it had a lot of paperwork and so that didn't work for us. And it set our journeyman on a different course than like a Sikorsky or an electric boat. So my caution here would be to make sure we talk to the smaller businesses like us to say, what kind of funding programs? And I'll give you some examples. Is it that, the student has to work a minimum of 8 weeks? And at the end of that, we certify that they've learned, a certain skill set that they're bringing back to. And then there's, the state provides a 25% subsidy back to us. I think that kind of stuff would be very interesting to smaller businesses where it's easy to manage, but it's trackable, and we have to certify that the student has done the position per the job description we hired for. So I don't know if that helps.
A lot. That's great. In terms of like the system funding, the intermediary, I think is something we do want to propose. In other states, what we have seen, a lot of the intermediary funding is done by philanthropy. So we may propose some type of braided funding. And Chris, I know you're on the call if you have any input here, because you've spent a lot of time on thinking through braiding funding, especially with philanthropy. But that'll be a factor when we consider what type of intermediary structures we put together and like what kinds of organizations philanthropy might fund. So just like a little food for thought. Erin, any thoughts on the funding for teacher professional development? How often you've seen that, and where you think funding for that could sit? And this would be specific to like work-based learning and kind of, things like teacher and externships and other opportunities for teachers and school staff to learn more about the world of work and industry knowledge. I'm not sure if Erin's still with us.
You dropped off.
Oh, I did?
Dropped off.
Oh,
Nope,
she dropped off.
She did.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, this is something we can definitely follow up on, and we can also talk to Christine a little bit about some of these things. She may have some ideas. We can follow up with her. She couldn't stay on the call for long. Okay. Any other thoughts on this, or we can wrap up?
I think we're doing great work here. I think we're putting it all out there to then, make it a messy kind of magic. I think for me, if we go back to that one slide where Kathy and I both said, whoa, we need to like kind of study all these lanes.
Right.
That's such an important slide. I feel like right now it's just, this is my opinion, like too much. Like, is there any way to peel it back to say, hey, these are the things that are working? Like, I don't really even know what braided funding is. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going to make an assumption.
Yeah.
I'm going to make an assumption of what it is, but I don't know what really is.
Yeah.
So is there a way to peel that back to say, hey, we're going to simplify this to start. Here's the 10 concepts max we think we should start with. And we're
Yeah.
going to put these other things in a parking lot right now because we think they're either not developed or they were being used, but they weren't adopted as well.
Mhm.
And it just makes it, I think, easier for the users to say, okay, I can get my arms around this. I can really understand it. Because that's one thing that we do in Connecticut really well is we make things like overly complicated because we're all super smart. We're A types. We're like, throw it all in there. And then everyone's like, we can't figure out what we're doing. Yeah. So that's my one word of advice is how do we peel that page back and make it much simpler?
Love it.
That's great advice. So that's something we will task ourselves with and get send something back to the group that you can like give us some feedback on.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And then, so can you send this whole thing out like tonight so we could just mull on it?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. We will send this all out tonight, including the business survey. And I think that, yeah, just a reminder, here's our next steps. Next week, we're going to hopefully have a draft of a presentation, but in the meantime, we'll send this out to you. Feel free to give us feedback on any components of it as there was a lot of content in there that you didn't have time to read through. So if if you have time, I know everyone is super busy, but if you have time to have another read through it, feel free to send us feedback by an email, send us voicemails, ask for a call. Jen and I will entertain any and all communication methods.
All right. And then do we know the report out plan on the 27th as far as, I mean, at this point, have we been able to we're going to do that next week, kind of narrow this down further to like key takeaway recommendations?
Yep.
Okay.
That's the goal. So next week we'll come back to you with like a drafted presentation, which is really a draft for all of us to react to and figure out what we want to go to the commission with. We'll take the feedback we heard today and try and start that exercise, but it may be more, Nicole, than you say, no, that's just too complicated or too many things and we should focus on these priorities. So we'll come back with options.
Okay, and I know everyone's flying a million miles, but if we could get that presentation like by Friday, because then I think we can, spend a little quiet time over the weekend and Monday, Tuesday. So like I'm really ready, if there's any way. And I'm not saying you guys aren't doing a great job. It's just I think I need more time to like chew on this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
we'll see what we can get done. We do have the commission meeting on Thursday, so we will see what we can get by the end of the week. It might be just parts that go a little bit deeper, like maybe not the full thing. Maybe we do it in like little tranches or chunks, but we will do our absolute best.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.